Arkansas continues first ever state funding freeze for cities behind on audits. Arkansas is withholding state funding from dozens of towns that have been delinquent on their water and sewer audits for the last few years. This is the first time Arkansas has ever withheld municipal aid or turned back funds from cities for this purpose. The decision to withhold those funds was made by the Legislative Joint Auditing Committee in July. Act 453 of 2023 allowed lawmakers to withhold municipal aid to hold cities accountable and enforce the requirement they submit annual audit reports. This year, they decided to exercise that power with over 40 towns that hadn't completed water and sewer audits in the last 3 years. The state has withheld roughly $650,000 in monthly disbursements from those delinquent cities, and though it's spurring them to complete their audits, it's also hit their budgets hard. The turnback funds to some cities are the lifeblood of those cities being able to meet the needs of their citizens. That's why it's important that they get their audits done and turned in, said State Senator Kim Hammer, Republican District 16, a member of the Legislative Joint Auditing Committee. One of these cities is the city of Elaine, which says it's having to lay off contractors that fill out its water and street departments. I've just called them and said that tomorrow be your tomorrow's win, so it'll be your last day so I can no longer have the additional people. I thought maybe they'd return the funds and we continue on, just have 1 month where we struggle a little bit, but it looks like we're gonna have a couple of months where it's gonna be hard, said Lisa Hicks Gilbert, mayor of Elaine. Gilbert says Elaine has attempted to deliver on its audits, but certified public accountants it has hired to perform the audits have yet to complete them all. Some of us actively trying to get our audits done, but we're just at the mercy of the CPAs and just waiting our turn, I guess you'd say, and I'm not sure if the legislators were aware of this, Gilbert told KATV. Another concern for some smaller towns is that without state funds they depend on, they may not be able to pay for an audit. They need to complete the audit, but if they don't have the money to pay for the audit because they are expensive, then they wouldn't be able to move forward, Hammer said. I think that the offset to that is you've had several years to get this done. Why are you waiting till the last minute now? Last week at the Joint Auditing Committee, Hammer and some other lawmakers attempted to turn down the pressure for delinquent cities by releasing withheld funds. My motion, what it did, was allow a little mercy and grace to those cities that had shown good effort or were in the process of showing good effort, that we would go ahead and release their funds, Hammer told KATV. But Hammer's motion, and others, failed to get enough votes. Auditing Committee Chair Robin Lundstrom, Republican District 18, is among the lawmakers taking a firmer stance on holding cities accountable. In a statement to KATV, Lundstrom said, cities' mayors and city council members have been sent certified letters and have received phone calls from Legislative Audit, making them aware that this was coming and offering to answer any questions. It is incumbent on the cities to show their citizens that they are good stewards of their tax dollars. At the end of the day, Hammer believes cities will come out all right if they diligently work to catch up on audits, but he says a dozen haven't. I think the bigger issue is for those 12 that have done nothing at all, that their citizens are going to want to know why their needs aren't being met because the turnback funds have been withheld from them, Hammer warned. Lundstrom told KATV that delinquent cities that have completed their audits have received state funds within a day or two.
Okay, urgent and serious tone as if addressing a town hall meeting. Ladies and gentlemen, if a city goes without water and sewage services for even a few months, we are looking at a public health emergency, economic disruption, population displacement. This is not just a minor inconvenience. This is a major crisis. Now picture this. No clean water means you can't safely bathe, cook, or even hydrate. Hospitals, schools, nursing homes, all of them face immediate sanitation crises. We're not just talking inconvenience. This is about exposure to raw waste, and that means an increased risk of E. coli, hepatitis, and other serious waterborne diseases. And mosquitoes and rodents will love that stagnant waste. Talk about an open invitation to spread more disease. But it doesn't stop there. Without funding, repairs and maintenance just grind to a halt. Those aging pipes start leaking, pumps fail, and treatment plants degrade. Imagine the fire department trying to do its job without adequate water pressure. That compromises emergency response right there. And let's not forget the economic and social fallout. Businesses will close or just pick up and leave because they can't deal with unsanitary conditions. Property values will nosedive and people might simply be forced to leave, especially renters and homeowners. And yes, schools might have to shut down or go fully remote, disrupting our children's education and childcare. Ultimately, this erodes civic trust. People lose faith in local governance, and if this isn't resolved, that population decline is going to speed up. Small towns rely on these turnback funds to keep basic services going, and when that dries up, the whole community is at risk. So, even a short disruption isn't just some bureaucratic hiccup in Arkansas, it's a warning signal, and we have got to pay attention, folks. Let's work together to figure out which towns are most at risk and how we can build resilience before we find ourselves in even deeper trouble. With a concerned and serious tone. So what we see here is a real challenge. Dozens of municipalities losing critical funding because of delinquent water and sewer audits. And wouldn't you know it, many of these towns are predominantly Black, rural, and historically underserved. It's not just a bureaucratic hiccup. It's about environmental justice and how these communities might face even larger disparities in health and economic stability if no one moves in to help. So yes, I'm absolutely ready to explore these demographics with you or dig into those historical patterns. This is important stuff.
All right. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glories to Yahweh, whom this world ignorantly calls God, Bahashem, which means in the name of Yahweh Shai, whom this world ignorantly calls Jesus, Bahashem, Rakah HaKodash. All right, so that's the Paleo Hebrew for the Heavenly Father, His only begotten Son, and the Holy Spirit. All right, I want to give double honors to the elders and apostles of Great Millstone who do rule well, preaching His truth on the highways and hedges, risking their lives and freedom to do so. Shalom, shalom. I want to also give a sincere shalom to the 1/3 part of Israel scattered to the four corners of the earth, which will be you so-called Negroes, so-called Blacks, Latinos, and Native Americans. You are the true Israelites, and this is also for the Israelites who appear like the other nations, who look like the other nations, but in fact go back to the 12 patriarchs of Israel. Shalom to you and your households. All right, so we see Arkansas has an auditing issue where 12 cities are without audit, and so they have what they call turnback funds, right? So the auditors are pretty much slow moving and haven't produced their audits, so they risk losing water for, I think they said in the article, up to 2 months. And you just seen the effects of a city losing their water and sewage. You know, it's going to cause contamination, pestilence, potential disease, the closure of schools and other institutions within the city that would that's necessary for it to function properly. So that being said, we're gonna get into some precepts. All right. So first, you see the racial demographics snapshot based on the U.S. Census estimate for the said towns. See 90% so-called Black, 65% so-called Black, so on and so forth. You see that? So these communities, and it is 12 cities. Once again, and you see the populations, and it's like it's no mistake. Make no mistake about it, man. This is in my humble opinion, I believe that it's intentional. That these communities suffer. So this is a part of the troubles that we're gonna be coming into. All right, so it says many of these towns are predominantly Black, rural, and historically underserved, which it says historically underserved, which raises concerns about environmental justice and equitable infrastructure support, withholding funds from these communities. You see that? Especially without immediate remediation plans. This can deepen disparities in health, sanitation, and economic stability. All right, so that's pretty powerful stuff right there. So we got a history of underserved communities, which are so-called Black, rural, which is ultimately Israelites, right? The southern tribe of Judah. So this is the demographic of the area. And I'm reporting on this because I am in Arkansas. So, I'm pretty sure the city of Little Rock, where I dwell, it doesn't have that issue because it's like, you got the city here and they got banks and all this stuff like that, and then, you got the governor's mansion out here. So she's going to make sure that Little Rock is cool. And it's multicultural out here, which means it's a lot of so-called white people out here, right? The Edomites, Esau. So, they're going to take care of their own. But as far as our people are concerned, in those so-called black, rural, and historically underserved areas, you see it ain't no help coming, and it's like, how are all the other surrounding cities and counties provided for, from the federal government or whatever, right? But the areas that are predominantly so-called black aren't, the racial disparity, man, And so, yeah, like I say, I'm going to get into some precepts and now I'll close it out. All right, so let's cover the first point. I was watching GMS South Carolina last night, and he made a valid point. I believe if I'm correct, so he went into Acts 13 talking about who the Israelites were, right? So-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans. So reason why I say, this is all done on purpose is because Jake over here in America don't never get a fair shake, never have, because we under the curses of Deuteronomy 28. But let's get into Acts 13 real fast. It says, now there was in the church that was at Antioch certain prophets and teachers, right? So the prophets and teachers, these Israelites, it says, as Barnabas and Simeon, that was called Niger, and Lucius of Cyrene, and Manaen, which had been brought up with Herod the Tetrarch and Saul. All right, so that word Simeon, that was called Niger. That's what we want to look at. So I made some notes as I heard the video, and I went to the Blue Letter Bible to get this information on the name Simeon and Niger. Simeon, that was called Niger, right? So you got to remember Apostle Peter, which was a disciple of Yahushua, his name was also Simon. Okay, so Simon, Simeon are similar names, and those are Israelite names. All right, so let's get into the notes that I got here. So this is according to the Blue Letter. It says Niger is pronounced Niger, right? It says of Latin origin, which means black. Niger. It says a Christian. So a Christian, was associated with the word the N word, the hard R, right? Because that's what they call the Christians in the early times. So the Romans put a derogatory name on Niger or Negers, so-called blacks, right? As a derogatory term. So Christian was a derogatory name. That's what the Romans was calling us, and that would be the so-called white tea, man, the Edomites from back then. All right, and it says here the name of 5 Israelites, Simeon, Simon, see that? And that was the original name of Peter the Apostle. His name was Simon Peter, right? So there was, of course, Negroes, so-called Negroes, Israelites, okay? They got the name. Why would you call somebody Simon or Simeon, meaning Niger or Neger, so-called black, when they weren't Israelites? You don't do that, right? So that proves who the Israelites are, all right? So that was a strong point, and it's beautiful that the brother brought that out. The water for that if you're watching this, all right? Let's move on. All right, so we're in the book of James, and this is going to get into a little bit of the diaspora and then the various temptations and things that we got to go through, It says, James, a servant of Yahweh and of the Lord Yahushua HaMashiach, to the 12 tribes which are scattered abroad, greeting. So the 12 tribes is the Israelites. It says, my brethren, count it all joy when ye fall into diverse temptations, knowing this, that the trying of your faith worketh patience. All right, so we being tried in these times, right? But let faith, have its perfect work. Okay, it says there, but let patience have her perfect work, that ye may be perfect and entire, wanting nothing. All right, so we're being tried, man, right now. It says, if any of you lack wisdom, let him ask of Yahweh, that giveth to all men liberally, and upbraideth not, and it shall be given him. All right, so that means that once you ask Yahweh for that wisdom, right? Who will give to you freely, right? He'll give it. Don't change from it. Don't turn away from it. It's basically what it's saying. It says, but let him ask in faith, nothing wavering. For he that wavereth is like a wave of the sea driven with the wind and tossed. It says, for let not that man think that he shall receive anything of the Lord. All right. It says here, a double-minded man is unstable in all his ways, because that goes back to verse 6 where it says, for a man that asks in faith, nothing will waver. All right. For he that wavereth is like a wave of the sea driven, just like you, with the wind and tossed. Right. So he's indecisive. He's not secure. He doesn't know very much. But if you have wisdom, you know how to operate in these times, in these trying times that we're about to come upon. You hear what's going on with Arkansas, and this is not the last instance of something like this happening. Because remember, you got to remember, this stuff is intentional. So with that knowledge and wisdom, fear Yahweh, because judgment is coming upon this place. But Jacob's trouble says that, it says about Jacob's trouble that Jacob, which is the 12 tribes of the 12 tribes of Israel shall be saved out of it. All right. Jeremiah 30, verse 7. Alas, for that day is great. What day is that? That's the day of the Lord. All right. So that none is like it. It is even the time of Jacob's trouble, but he shall be saved out of it. See? All right. So yeah, this place is getting ready to break down on an exponential level and on an increasing level. All right. So a lot of things is getting ready to become undone in this place. You see the infrastructure, they say the schools even going to be closed down. So people are going to have to relocate. Apartment buildings is going to close. Because people ain't going to want to live in a place where ain't no utilities, man. If you lacking water and sewage, it's going to start stinking. It's going to get real out here, man. Don't nobody want to deal with that. Nobody want to do business like that. So businesses will close. That means grocery stores, the place where you go to get your food, the place where you go shopping for your household goods and your household needs, your necessities, right? It says in verse 8, for it shall come to pass in that day, said Yahweh of hosts, that I will break his yoke from off thy neck and will burst thy bonds. Okay. And strangers shall no more serve themselves of him. Right. But they shall serve the Lord Yahweh. Right. And David their king, whom I will raise up unto them. Right. So the yoke that's on our necks, as far as utilities and being subject to payment, because this is a captivity that we in, that yoke gonna be bursted from off our neck, man. Our bonds, our ties with these people is gonna all eradicate, right? It says it's strangers. So these people are strangers over here. These colonizers, the Edomites, are strangers to us, right? They shall no more serve themselves of us, all right? It says, but they shall serve Yahweh their power, and David their king, whom I will raise up unto them. Right? So these are just the beginnings of Jacob's trouble, right? But the Lord Yahweh is going to raise up David, right, among our people, right? Because he said it. The Most High, he doesn't decree something or say anything out of his mouth that returns onto him void, which means it's going to accomplish what he set out for it to accomplish, to roughly paraphrase. All right. It says in verse 10, therefore fear thou not, O my servant Jacob, saith the Lord power Yahweh. Neither be dismayed, O Israel, for lo, I will save thee from afar, and thy seed. So save thee from afar is the diaspora. We over here, we over there. We down south in Mexico, South America. We up north in Canada. We are in all places, man. Scattered to the four winds of the earth. It says, I will save thee from afar, and thy seed from the land of their captivity. See, we in this captivity. It says, and Jacob shall return and shall be in rest and be quiet, and none shall make him afraid. Right? Because people are afraid right now, man. Water and sewage is a major utility, in this place. I mean, it's a captivity, but still, like, people got used to those conveniences. And when those conveniences suddenly go away, things change. You're gonna see a lot of women out here being humbled. Hold on. All right, verse 13. There is none to plead thy cause, that thou mayest be bound up. Thou hast no healing medicines. All thy lovers have forgotten thee. They seek thee not, for I have wounded thee with the wound of an enemy. You see that? So we treat it like an enemy over here in Babylon the Great. It says, with the chastisements of a cruel one, for the multitude of thine iniquity, because thy sins were increased. Right. So if you go to any J community, you know, you see a lot of brothers holding what they call toolies, you know, guns, basically, you know what I'm saying? Gats, whatever you want to call it, you know, committing crimes against our own. And then you got the police, you know, the adversary, you know, they doing the same thing to us, right? So we disproportionately affected. We small in number as far as the rest of the population goes. We the smallest. I think we like 15% of the U.S. All right. It says, verse 15, why criest thou for thine affliction? Right? Because the multitude of our iniquities, man. You know, worshiping this place, worshiping idols. You know, going to these false institutions, learning false doctrine, and being just lost in the sauce, man. All right? Because thy sins were increased, I have done these things unto thee. See that? Verse 16, therefore all that devour thee shall be devoured, and all thine adversaries, every one of them shall go into captivity. Right? And they that spoil thee shall be a spoil, and all that prey upon thee will I give for a prey. For I will restore health unto thee. You see that? It's about to get unhealthy out here. But Yahweh, he hasn't forgotten us. He's going to restore health to us. Right? Make us whole again. Right? He says, and I will heal thee of thy wounds, saith the Lord. Right? The wounds of an enemy. Right? So he's not going to make us an enemy anymore. He's going to look upon us with mercy because he knows the time we're coming into. And he said what? At the top of this chapter, he will deliver us out of this trouble, man. Okay, because they called thee an outcast, right? You see the disproportionately affected areas, the ones that ain't gonna get the funding, the audit necessary to keep the utilities, the water, and the sewage on. They calling us an outcast by doing that. They don't care about us. They say that this is Zion, whom no man seeketh after. You see that? All right, so let's get into a little bit more of what we're going to see. This is 2 Ezra 15, beginning at verse 14. Woe to the world and them that dwell therein. What does woe mean? Destruction, man. It says, woe to the world and them that dwell therein. For the sword and their destruction draweth nigh. Okay? Who is blessed with the sword? That's Esau. Okay? Esau is blessed with the sword. For the sword and their destruction draweth nigh. And one people shall stand up and fight against another, and swords in their hands. Okay, so that's talking about weaponry, man. Okay, for there shall be sedition among men. That's what we're hearing about right now. Sedition. All right, uprisings, protests. Okay, you have the J6ers. You know what I'm saying, doing what they did. Right. It says, in invading one another, they shall not regard their kings nor princes. Right, so that's exactly what's happening. It says, in the course of their actions shall stand in their power. Right, you even got the White House divided. You got Pete Hegseth saying one thing about putting a Qatari base in the United States, and then you got the which is Pete Hegseth is what, the Secretary of War in the War Department. And then I think it was like the very next day, you had Vice President J.D. Vance come out and say, "Oh, that's largely fake news." That the story is. We heard it out of Pete Hegseth's mouth. We heard him calling the Qatari royal family "Your Excellency," kissing ass, like, you know. So, you know, yeah, man. It says, "In the course of their actions shall stand in their power. A man shall desire to go into a city and shall not be able." Okay, so when you get a federalized police force. You got ICE, you know. You got Issachar, the tribe of Issachar, so-called Mexicans. They're not even going to Vegas no more because they're afraid that ICE gonna run down on them and gaffle them up and take them across the border. You know. You got that in many cities right now. You got people not even coming. You know how usually we got flights to America from other countries. Ain't nobody coming to this place. This place is desolate. It's becoming a wilderness, becoming even more and more desolate by the day. They're afraid of deportations. They see what's going on the news. They see the reports of people being racially discriminated against. Who want to come here? You can't even get comfortable. And then the cost of everything is going up, right? It says, for because of their pride, because of their pride, the Edomites' pride, man. All right, let's keep it real. It says the cities shall be troubled. That's what's going on in Arkansas right now. The cities, and this is not the only city going through this. I'll bet this is local news. So look into your neck of the woods and see if something similar is happening. I'll bet you it is. And look at the racial demographic of the areas that's being affected. It says the houses shall be destroyed and men shall be afraid. Okay? You know, you got a lot of weak so-called men that's weak. They're not going to be able to deal with this because guess what? They unstable. They're wavering like the roaring seas, man. Unstable because they don't have the knowledge and wisdom of Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahushai, nor do they have the faith, right, to commit to doing what's right and what's righteous. This is why the cities are troubled in the first place. Lack of faith, lack of belief in Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahushai. All right. Verse 19 says that a man shall. This is Ezra. You know, Ezra. Okay. It says a man shall have no pity upon his neighbor. So you know, man, that word neighbor. If you go into the word neighbor, let's look at that real quick, man. All right. So in a biblical system, or neighbor, let's get into it. It says the Hebrew word Ria appears in Leviticus 19 and 18. It says where it says, love your neighbor as yourself, right? I am power. Originally, this referred to fellow Israelites. You see that? Originally, so it don't, anybody that changed the definition of something has got to be the deceiver, okay? I gotta keep it salty, right? It says emphasizing communal responsibility, fairness, and non-retaliation, because that's the law. It says in the Ten Commandments, Exodus 20, that also use neighbor in moral laws. Do not covet your neighbor's house, implying respect for others' dignity and property. And that would be, once again, who? Your fellow Israelite. You see that? Let me read that again from the top in verse 19. A man shall have no pity upon his neighbor. So that means infighting as far as Israelites, you know, are concerned. You're going to have Jake running up in Jake's spot. It says, but shall destroy their houses with the sword. You know how Jake got them switches now and all that extra, you know, the choppers and Dracos and all that bullshit they got. You know, Esau's toys. They got all that. They're going to destroy houses with the sword and spoil goods because of the lack of bread. You see that? Remember, going back to the article, they're going to shut down stores in the communities because there ain't going to be no water and sewage. They're not going to be able to operate. Nobody going to want to do business in an unsanitary condition, man. This is a snowball effect. This is a domino effect. This is just the beginning, man. It says because of the lack of bread and for great tribulation. And that's Jacob's trouble, man. Great tribulation, man. All right. So according to Copilot, it says the great tribulation in the Bible refers to a period of intense suffering, persecution, and upheaval preceding divine judgment. All right. And the return of Hamashiach Yahweh Shai. Okay. Divine judgment. All right. It's going to precede that. Right. Intense suffering. The persecution, those things are coming. All right, Matthew 24 and 21 says, for then shall be great tribulation, such as was not since the beginning of the world. This is going to be major, man. All right. Revelation chapter 7, verse 14 describes saints who came out of great tribulation, having endured those trials and remained faithful. Okay. You don't want to be wavering. You don't want to be unsteady. You don't want to be a double-minded man in the times coming. You want to be solid and sure. That's why the Bible says to make your calling and election sure, because only the elect and the 1/3 part of Israel who actually believe on Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahushai is going to make it through this thing. All right. Spiritual testing. Right. A core biblical theme. It says a refining period for believers, separating the faithful from the deceived, the sheep from the goats, the righteous from the unrighteous. Spiritual testing as gold in a furnace, burning off the impurities. The Lord, the Yahweh, why Yahweh Shai is going to sweep this place with the besom of destruction, right? That's called divine judgment. Global distress is what we're going to see. War, famine, deception, and cosmic signs. They mark this time. Okay, you're going to see signs in the heavens, signs on the earth. You know, nonetheless, there will be signs, right? You can recall the disciples of Yahweh Shai asking him, Lord, when will the parting asunder of the times be? Okay, and Yahweh Shai told him, you know, he provided scriptural proof of the signs and told us what to look for in these days. All right, and it was given to us to know that we are the Israelites. We got imposters claiming that they us, right? But the Bible says, I know thy poverty and thy tribulation, but thou art rich. Rich in what? Rich in the spirit, rich in wisdom and knowledge. It says, and it also says, I know those who say they are the J word and are not. All right? Basically to say, I know those that say they are Hebrew Israelites and are not. But in fact are the synagogue of Satan. The synagogue of Satan is the one that control America's purse. You know, yeah, her purse got strings attached to it. And those strings go right back to the three-city empire. Once again, that the brother from GMS, South Carolina brought out. Beautiful point. The three-city empire, right? Why three? Well, you know, they call it a triad or you know, whatever you want to call it. But that three-city empire it's got three parts to it. The financial arm, which is England, okay? And then you got Washington D.C. for its military, and then you got the third part, which is the religious arm, which is the Vatican, okay, right? And so you got all of these entities, you know, working in concert and working together. They are confederate against us, the Israelites, okay? Psalms 83, beginning at verse 4, they have said, come and let us cut them off from being a nation, that the name of Israel may be no more in remembrance. For they have consulted together with one consent. They are confederate against thee. The tabernacles of Edom, right? That's the so-called white T-man, Salakia, and the Ishmaelites, which is the so-called Arabs. We got to call it what it is. Of Moab, right? That's China. That's Asia, okay? And the Hagarenes, all right? So we just going to stop right there with that. So we're going to get into the Most High delivering us up out of this trouble that we in. But yeah, you see those all these other nations are against us. They've always been against us, you know? And that's just how the Most High wrote his script. He is the author and finisher of our faith. All right, so if we don't depend fully on Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, we're gonna stumble and fall, man. All right, we following blind leaders, you know, blind guides. Guess what? They're gonna lead you into a ditch. But if we following the true men of the Lord, great millstone, right? Listen to those men. They bringing out this 100% truth and giving it to you just the way it's written. Okay, breaking down these scriptures and these dark sayings, right? So listen to the exhortation. Do not miss the discourse of our elders at Great Millstone. All right? The elders, the apostles, and bishops on down. You know, fellow laborers in this truth, shalom and tawada for you for bringing these lessons out every day. Right? Because it's going to come a time where we won't even get this word anymore. It's going to be a famine of the hearing of the word of the Lord. All right? And those are the times we get ready to come in. You know? They got a movie called Fahrenheit. I forget the numbers, but called Fahrenheit something starring what's brother name? Michael B. Jordan, where they had like a dystopian or a type of future where the firemen of that day in the future, they was actually burning books. And that's not even a new thing, for the Bible says that there's no new thing under the sun. Because back in the times I believe it's the Maccabean period, you know, when Maccabees was on the earth, you know, during the rebellion against Rome, that guess what? They was burning books back then. So there's nothing new under the sun. These devils, they've been doing the same thing for centuries. But so have Israelites been doing, been going off for quite some time as well. But this is the last captivity our people are going to have to suffer through and endure before the great and terrible day of the Lord, man, because it's going to be a day of darkness. Okay? This, nothing's going to ever be the same on this place. For Esau is the end of the world, and Jacob is the beginning of it that followeth. Okay, the Israelites are the beginning of the new world, the new Jerusalem, the new Zion. The new heaven, the new earth. We look forward to our kingdom, right? We're gonna have to deal with these Edomites. All right. Revelation 12. I'll begin at let's go up a little bit. Verse 10. And I heard a loud voice saying in heaven, now has come salvation and strength in the kingdom of our power Yahweh and the power of his anointed one, Yahweh Shai HaMashiach. For the accuser of our brethren is cast down, which accused them before our power day and night. And they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. And they loved not their lives unto the death. So if you love this place, Babylon the Great, man, hey, man, your love is misplaced. Your treasure is in the wrong place. Your mind and your heart is in the wrong place. All right, verse 12. Therefore, rejoice ye heavens, right? And ye that dwell in them. You see? So if you dwell in heaven, that means your conversation is in heaven. You in Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, and Yahweh Shai and Yahweh is in you. All right, that's the heavens, okay? But it says, woe to the inhabitants of the earth and of the sea, right? The sea represents what? The people, all right? For the devil has come down onto you, and we see him, he having great wrath, because he knoweth that he hath but a short time, all right? Revelation 14, and I looked, and lo, a lamb stood on the Mount Zion, right? So that would be Yahweh Shai standing on the Mount Zion, and with him 144,000 having his father's name written in their foreheads, right? So the name that's going to be written in the 144,000 elect men of Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai is going to have their father's name, Yahweh, written in their foreheads, right? It says in verse 4, these are they which were not defiled with women, for they are virgins. Okay, so women is multiple, right? So that is false doctrine, right? These are they which follow the Lamb whithersoever he goeth. Remember, Yahweh Shai said, I go to my father to prepare you a house. My father hath many mansions, and if it were not so, I would tell you. All right, so we following the Lamb in glory, but we also must follow the Lamb in this in this persecution. You see, if we are to enjoy the inheritance, right, in the glory, we are also to endure the affliction, the persecution, as he did, right? Because it's a cleansing agent. It's a purification process. You baptize by hearing the word of truth, the word of Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, because he is the word made flesh. In the volume of the book, come looking like his kinsman, okay, so-called Negro. But you want to believe the lie of these Edomites who portray Yahweh Shai as with the name Jesus and having pale skin, blue eyes, and long stringy hair, which is an abomination. It says these were redeemed from among men, being the first fruits unto power and to the Lamb. And in their mouth was found no guile. That means no deceit. For they are without fault before the throne of power. And that same power, with Yahweh, while Yahweh Shai, are the same ones that created this earth and created you. And remember, Jacob's trouble, that Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai will deliver us out of it. You see that? So keep your faith, keep your loins girt. Keep that armor on you, man. Okay? And that's not a carnal armor I'm talking about. I'm talking about feet shod with the preparation of the gospel of peace. Bring this truth out. Magnify the name of the Lord with the sword of the spirit of truth by bringing out his word, right? In due season, in good season, right? Be circumspect, Consider your surroundings. Look around you. Be vigilant, okay? Stand on your watch, right? Have righteousness in your heart. Have salvation on your mind, okay? And keep your shield of faith, because that's going to protect you. Ultimately, these are the tools and blessings, the armor, the very armor of Yahweh Bashim Yahushua. So with that being said, abad babal to this wicked place. Kwam Yashar Allah. All right? Begin to face the east. Call Hala Yamla, Yahweh, Baha Shum, Yahweh Shai, Baha Shum, Rakaha Kodash. To the next one, Shalom.